The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. I noticed we had a number of people that are new to me anyway, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Reverend Margaret, and I'm a disciple of Reverend Master Jiyu-Kennett, and it's good to see you all. Thank you for coming today, and to everybody for coming today. So I'm going to be talking about Great Master Dogen's essay, Hachi Dainin Gaku, the 8 Qualities of a Great Person. Also today, we celebrated Memorial Day in honor of those who've died as a result of wars. We know that wars continue even as we speak, so I'd like to begin by repeating something that was offered in last Sunday's talk by Reverend Master Daishin, which is a verse from the Dhammapada. Never by hatred is hatred conquered, but by readiness to love alone. This is eternal law. We mourn the loss of those who die in war, not only the human beings, but think of all the dogs, cats, insects, and other beings. We mourn them with the wish for peace for all the world. We may not be able yet to love the leaders of nations who order bombings and missile strikes, but notice that the translation of the verse that I read says readiness to love. We can all get ready to love. We can all turn our hearts toward loving kindness for all beings if we make the effort. It isn't easy, but we can do it. So onwards now to today's topic. And I noticed one of the lines in one of the invocations today said, victory is conquering all the greeds of self. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. The essay, Hachi Dainin Gaku, is the final teaching given by Great Master Dogen. In addition, it's based on the scripture of the Buddha's last teachings, the final words of Shakyamuni Buddha, spoken just before his death. Dogen's essay is chapter 96, the final chapter in his Shobo Genzo, as translated by the late Reverend Master Hubert Neerman, which can be found on our website under Teachings and Publications. What I appreciate about both these scriptures is their simplicity. They speak in plain words about ways in which we ordinary people can live the fullest possible lives, and they are worthy of our attention and respect as the final words of 2 great teachers. So let's begin with the title, specifically, and this is in Japanese, the word dainin. The first part of this talk will refer to the teachings of the late Japanese Soto Zen master Kosho Uchiyama Roshi, who died in the late 1990s, and specifically on this book, The Roots of Goodness, which is here, his commentary on Great Master Dogen's essay. Uchiyama Roshi says, in Buddhism, what is of highest value is becoming what is called a dainin, or true adult. He says that this term dainin is found in the scripture of the Buddha's last teachings, and that it evolved into the term bodhisattva in later scriptures of the Mahayana tradition. He contrasts this with those who behave like children, hopping from one want to the next in an endless quest for satisfaction. And the old Rolling Stones song perfectly describes this futile endeavor. The dainin, or bodhisattva, lives instead by vow. That word vow doesn't need to frighten you or us. It used to frighten me, because I would think of, if I made a vow, I'm bound to break it, and then what? So now I've come to see vows as not something to be broken, but as guidelines to be observed and to help us in doing the very best we can. In our practice, we take the Bodhisattva vows: to save all beings, to transform all passions, to comprehend the Buddha's teachings completely, and to realize or make the truth real for ourselves and others. Those vows are boundless in scope, and we keep them in spirit. We also take smaller vows in the course of each day. We brush our teeth and put our kesas on for the benefit of all living things. We eat in order to realize the truth rather than to satisfy our greeds. At the beginning of this talk, we all vowed together to make the Buddha's truth one with ourselves. We can't break that vow. Some months ago, I happened across one of the Buddhist magazines that are in general circulation, and while leafing through it, I saw an ad for this book that was to be published at a later date, and that would deal with the 8 qualities of a great person. I thought, great, let me find out what those qualities are. I want some, The greed arose. But I had to wait a couple of months because it wasn't going to be published for a while in order to find that out. Or so I thought, not having read in the fine print about the book that it was a commentary on chapter 96 of the Shobogenzo. So that all along those qualities were right there on our website. I could have looked them up at any time. I'm not going to make you wait any longer to hear what they are. I waited for 2 months. The 8 qualities of a great being are: 1, having few desires; 2, knowing one has enough; 3, appreciating serenity or quietude; 4, making diligent effort or perseverance; 5, not losing sight of true Dharma; 6, concentrating on settling in meditation; 7, practicing wisdom, and here's an interesting one at the last: not engaging in useless argument or discussion. In approaching this talk, my intention was to run through the whole lot of them, offering a few points of teaching for each one. However, when I sat down and started to work, that approach appeared, if not impossible, then at least silly. So I decided to focus on the first 2, having few desires and knowing one has enough, which seemed to me to be related. And so from that came the title of this talk: How much is enough? I'll read the opening lines in Great Master Dogen's essay and this is the section on having few desires. The first quality is having few desires. That is, not wildly chasing after the objects of one's desires that have not yet been fulfilled, is what is called having few desires. The Buddha expounded, "Monks, here is something you need to be aware of. A person with many longings or cravings suffers proportionately greater, precisely because he or she seeks greater personal gain or other benefit. When one pursues few desires, there will be less suffering and fewer troubles. Personally, having few desires needs to be thoroughly studied and practiced. Moreover, not following those cravings engenders an uncountable merits. A person with few cravings will never try to flatter or ingratiate themselves with another, nor would one of few desires be dragged around by the cravings of the 5 senses. One whose heart acts with few desires is always at peace and has few anxieties or misgivings. And regarding various matters, such a person feels no need for more, one always has more than enough. In a word, one with few desires is virtually in nirvana. This is what is called having few desires. Desires here refers to what comes in through the five senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and it implies something that we don't already have. Now, you may know, some of you do know, from the scripture of great wisdom that there's also a sixth sense, mind. It talks about eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. We'll also consider desires that spring from mental constructions a little later. Uchiyama Roshi points out that desires are not something bad that needs to be gotten rid of. That's what the Buddha learned from his years of practicing asceticism, and he taught the middle way. This also points to the line in our mealtime verse that says, "We will eat lest we become lean and die." Without any desire for food, we wouldn't last long. We practice excluding greed from our minds and cultivating the spirit of self-restraint, gratitude for what we've been given, mindful of the gracious spirit of giving. I mentioned in one recent talk about a time of when I did not succeed in this self-restraint, when I grabbed the serving of macaroni and cheese that had the most cheese on top. When a monk vastly senior to me in monastic life was right behind me in the line, and I could have left it for them. I felt bad about this immediately, and I'm using that to say I haven't done that since then. I'm using that to motivate me not to do it again. I don't want to feel that way again. The Dainin, or Bodhisattva, practices wise discernment in reflecting on where they need to practice self-restraint. For me, food is a major area of concern. Thanks to the generosity of people who support us, we eat well here, and it's difficult for a person of good appetite, such as myself, to hold back, especially when it comes to sweets. Each day offers opportunities to check my level of hunger and take only as much as I need. Sometimes I succeed and sometimes not. It's slow going. There's also the opposite of overindulgence, asceticism. During one period of my life, I needed to lose a few pounds and went on a diet. I was extreme about it, and I got to where I had to force myself to eat, as the desire not to eat replaced the former desire that was its opposite. Fortunately, this has changed and is no longer a problem. In Dogen's words, the point is not chasing wildly after the object of one's desires, the objects of one's desires that have not yet been fulfilled. Not chasing wildly is the key. We can start there. Another type of desire is connected with mental and emotional objects or concepts. Examples might include wanting to be more competent, wanting to be liked or loved, even wanting to be a better person. Just what makes a better person? I don't know. Wanting justice or fairness, wanting enlightenment like Shakyamuni Buddha had. A national leader might convince their people that it would be good to conquer a neighboring country in order to possess its land and resources, or to bring freedom for its people. Wanting more. A strong enough desire of this type can lead to war and great suffering for many beings. None of us here, I believe, are national leaders, but we can look at our own lives. What imaginary desires influence us? Maybe it's the desire to be liked, loved, respected. I know I've got this one. Someone might work themselves sick because they want to look energetic or industrious and not lazy. To be respected, not least of all by oneself. But we all grow old and die. Many of us are now in the midst of that aging process as we speak. Not everybody, but many of us. We'll never again be lovable, that is, sexually attractive, as we were when we were 16, or competent as we were in our younger years. We may not be able to sit cross-legged in meditation or do our work practice as vigorously as we once did. Some of us will even go on to experience dementia and incontinence, needing to be cared for like children or babies. How will we continue to do our practice then? Uchiyama Roshi says that what is important is being aware of our desires, both sensory and imaginary, and not pursuing them. So being aware, mindfulness. The Dainin, he says, cultivates a spirit of trying to give, even if it's only a little bit, a natural spirit of self-restraint, of reducing one's desires, not wildly chasing after them and not pushing them away, reducing them. That gradual approach makes sense to me, using as much self-control as is needed. This is looking with the eye of the Dainin. This is all very well, but what do we do with the powerful sense of craving, clinging, and dissatisfaction? Uchiyama Roshi suggests that we consider whether these thoughts are really us. What do they have to do with us? Are they the boss of us? In his teaching, thoughts are nothing more than secretions of the brain. Just as the salivary glands secrete saliva, the brain secretes thoughts, just because it's a human brain. Are we no more than the secretions of our brain? He then refers to the connection between all things, the life force, he calls it. In his words, the power or force that enables you and me to breathe and be alive is connected to the life force for all things. The medieval hermit Julian of Norwich put it, a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go. Recognizing ourselves as part of that great connection can give rise to true satisfaction. Desire, wanting, craving, clinging, is based on an underlying sense of lack, isn't it? We wouldn't want that extra cookie if we realized and accepted the fact that our stomachs were already full. So the remedy for the sense of lack or want is realization of the truth that we already have what we need: enough food, a warm place to work, meditate, and sleep. Above all, we have the three refuges of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that help us convert our karmically conditioned greeds, hatreds, and delusions. We all partake of Buddha nature. We can remind ourselves of this inherent sufficiency throughout the day and night by taking a deep breath, silently reciting the three refuges of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and asking them to help us. In concluding this first section, Uchiyama Roshi says this: my definition of dainin here is cleaning up your life by yourself without whining. I like that part. Without whining. I have to watch myself on that one. The dainin in our text, Hachi Dainin Gaku, is a true adult who doesn't whine. The first quality or spirit of a great person is having few desires. The first thing we must do is to practice having few desires. See, we practice it. It's not something we just snap our fingers. We practice it. And living in that way, we become a genuine model in the world for children and all the other hungry ghosts. And by children, I think he means the people behaving like children, hopping from one want to the next. So when we connect with Buddha nature, we realize our true condition of having enough. And this leads to the second quality of a great being, knowing we have enough, or in a word, contentment. For this part, I'll turn to a quotation from Reverend Master Hubert's translation of chapter 96, which he translates as, "On the 8 realizations of a great one." I'll read the entire text on the second quality, as it's brief. It goes, "The second is being content, which means limiting what you take to those things that you already have available to you. As the Buddha said, if you wish to be free from miseries and woes, look into contentment, which is synonymous with knowing what is enough. The teaching of contentment is none other than the location of true wealth, ease, security, and peace. The person who is contented, though he sleeps upon the bare ground, is still at ease and satisfied. Someone who is discontented, even if he were ensconced in a celestial palace, would still not find this tallying with his ideas and tastes. The one who is discontented, though rich, is poor. The person who is contented, though poor, is rich. The one who is discontented always does what his 5 desires latch onto. He does that which causes grief to and arouses the compassionate pity of one who is contented. This is what I mean by being content." And we can look at a bit of this. Limiting what you take to the things already available to you brings for me to mind the precept on not taking what is not given, which is sometimes put as not to steal. For monks, there are the 4 requisites: food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. Having those, we have enough. What else is already available to all of us? Here's where I marked up that I can't read. Okay. As a person who tends to see the negative side of things, a helpful practice for me is from time to pause and just take stock of how fortunate I am. In the words of Dogen, how fortunate have we been to be born now when it is possible to see the truth. Gratitude is something I've found invaluable in cultivating contentment, the realization of sufficiency in my life. Gratitude is something we can take in hand and practice for ourselves. First thing in the morning, to be grateful for being alive. Last thing at night, to be grateful for another night's rest. Grateful for the air we breathe, the water that refreshes, and the food that sustains us. Those are easy and obvious. We can also go on to practice gratitude for everything. The computer that stalls and won't give us access to our email or documents. The coworker who so often finds fault with what we say and do. The person who won't listen to us or who always has to have the last word. Gratitude for our own faults, when we realize we've broken a precept or hurt someone, because the pain we suffer as a result motivates us in our resolve to do better next time. Reverend Master Jiyu speaks of gratitude in Roar of the Tigress, Volume 1, in a discussion of the teachings of Dogen set forth in the Shushogi, which tells us that the only real way to show gratitude is to express it in our daily life. Think of the enormity of that. How often do we think, speak, and act from gratitude? And don't despair. The good news is that this is something we can work on. It's a practice. In my experience, gratitude is a reliable source of contentment. The person who is contented, though he sleeps upon the bare ground, is still at ease and satisfied. Now, I don't sleep upon the bare ground, but We can be grateful for whatever we have. The one who is discontented always does what his 5 desires latch onto. That takes us right back to where we started. The great being, Dainin, or Bodhisattva, who refrains from chasing wildly after the objects of their desires. How much is enough? This can be one of the great questions of life. Who am I? What am I here for? It can also be a simple, ordinary life question. How much of this spaghetti is enough? How much money? How much time is enough to get this done? How much sleep is necessary to help me through the next day? We can ask ourselves that question. There's a saying in the alcoholism recovery program that goes something like this. 1 drink is always too many, and 100 drinks is never enough. How much is enough? A helpful question for reflection throughout the day, and I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you very much.